Little better. Okay. Live, kind of trying to be back into action. What's up, everybody? Gonna see if this hot tea kind of helps to fight through this. What's up, Zach? I am feeling a little bit better. Still a little congestion, runny nose a little bit, cough and stuff. But I mean, I've been out of commission for like a week, so it's been it's been interesting. But yeah, missing another week would have just thrown all kinds of plans out of sync. Unfortunately, thankfully we had, I didn't have a banked episode for last Saturday, and so yeah, man, it was unfortunately one of those just feeling awful. Supposed to go live, cold meds, sleeping too late and too long, and yeah. But I am not here for sob stories or whatever. I'm here to soldier through, and hopefully we will at least get a few peeps making an appearance. But yeah, it's definitely been interesting because I'm such a caffeine person, as far as like my coffee, and coffee ain't sitting well with me, unfortunately. So I'm rocking got the chai, got the Tazo going. But yeah, as per usual, I'll give it a few minutes. And I know it was kind of short notice. I didn't even know if I was going to be able to actually forge through this or not. But we will we will see. I suppose I should better get this volume down and get to some discussion, because this one is long overdue. Dale, how goes it, man? Hoping this is the first time I've talked to a camera in like a week and a half, so we'll see how this goes. But I'm trying to be in positive spirits, and obviously this is one that is exceptional, and it's up there as far as Side King stuff for me. As all four stories are very, very strong, and even the fifth one, which is Under the Weather, which I found so ironic as I was trying to do a little bit of research as I started feeling better later in the week. Yeah, it was it was just funny because in the paperback version of this, there actually is the inclusion of a fifth story called Under the Weather that was later collected as in Bizarre Bad Dreams, which we talked about last month, which was interesting. So, but I'm gonna do my damnedest to forge forward. So for anybody tuning in, it may not be as lengthy of a discussion as per normal, but just taking a little bit of time here later in the month to spend a bit of yours with me. I am feeling on the mend, which is good, but damn, I'll just address it right off the bat. Yeah, I wasn't sure if I had the Captain Trips, man, so I went and I got the embalming thing up the nose, and that was unpleasant but brief, thankfully, and that came back, negative, which is good. But a couple winters ago, man, I was just like my ass kicked by the flu. So I'm hopeful that that's what it was, but just quarantining here at home regardless, because I was out of commission and it was rough, but feeling at least good enough here to have some palaver with all of you. So, and I started an hour earlier than normal because I know that there's the American football playoff stuff going on, and I have a lot of friends into that crap. So, yeah, I was like, yeah, let's just start a little earlier. It'll be good for my international homies across the pond. And I'm taking after you guys with the hot team. So I don't know if I'll do as much preamble as normal. I'm just kind of very excited to get talking about this. So let's see how much of a hail to Stephen King I can actually muster. But once again, the grande gracias, say thank you to everybody. So long days and pleasant nights, fellow travelers along the path of the beam. I am known on this level of the tower as Jaime and Fuego, and if it please you, join me here for a bit of palaver on Hail to Stephen King, baby. Yes, the show that I am nearing 250 episodes of. It is just mind-blowing at this particular point. When I did The Plant, which was the last episode, actually, it's originally going to be this and some scheduling conflict stuff, and then this was supposed to be live last week. Sickness came into play, regrettably, but we're here. We made it, guys, and we're 2 episodes from the 250th. Just to give a little bearing about all of that, I know on the New Year's Day stream, Cecil and I believe Dave was still there too, They gave some context about the upcoming 7th season of the show that is about to start. I just started the 5th year of doing this show, which is crazy. But I believe sometime in, early April is when we're anticipating the start of the 7th season. And this program is going to be moving from Saturdays to Friday. And so it's going to be a frightening Friday with yours truly. But the one thing that is likely going to happen is that I have been wanting to do this Barker at the Moon content for a while. I have a few ideas for episodes of Run to the Hill, the Joe Hill show that I've done a few things with. And even the Lovecraft You to Death, which is another book segment about a different iconic horror author. So I'm still debating if I want to do Hail every week and then maybe, or, every other week, or if I want to have just maybe, the final Friday of the month be, a different writer, a Hill or a Barker, or, even maybe we could do a poll here on the show. I love the interactivity with you guys. And so maybe, Freak Out Friday is the time on the Facebook channel, the Facebook group already. And so maybe we could have a Freak Out Friday poll of a specific, horror book that we could have as a second book of the month and spotlight a different horror author. These are all things that I've been, kind of pondering as the new year has started, and as we're, after 250 episodes nearly, I still have a lot of ideas for content, but there is definitely an itch at times to do other things. So I may toss out a couple of those Run to the Hill episodes before the 250th, because Cecil and I have discussed a set redesign and all kinds of fun stuff like that too. But I'm supposed to be receiving my Cemetery Dance that night shift at some point. So that'll probably be the next episode, 249. And then maybe we'll do, some of those Hill episodes or something else. But 250, if you guys have any ideas for, what would be cool as far as a topic for 250, I have something in mind, but we have great kef amongst all of us, great discussion. And if you have any suggestions, please hit up the Facebook group or send an email, to the horror show. Cecil runs those basically to me if it's something specific. So, but yes, enough preamble. I'm going to look and see everybody who is taking a little time out of their day. It's greatly appreciated. Okay, so I gave a what's up to Dale, obviously. Jacob, good to see you, man. Good evening to you. Looking forward to this. It is. Yeah, it's a terrific novella collection, man. And I hope you were doing great across the pond. You stud, losing all that weight, looking badass. Troy's here. Yes, sir. Okay. Mark says, hi, Fuego. I'm not well, but I'm better. That's about as far as I can take it, unfortunately. I'm not going to be doing any horror show filming tomorrow. Cecil and the girls have everything under control. That's why we have this extended family and this badass core for people. And yes, there will be some thoughts about the stand. I'm not sure if I'm going to Skype in with them, or if since myself and Cecil already talked about the first episode, I know Marsha wants to talk about where the show is at this particular point, 5 episodes in. I'm not caught up. I need to get there. Yeah. So who else do we got here? Football crap. It's not real football, right, Dale? I'm with you there, man. Annabelle Rivera, what is going? Sounds interesting. Imagine get Sai King on at some point. Yes, that would be the ultimate goal. That's the fingers firmly crossed sort of situation here. But Scholar 22 making an appearance as well. Positive for 10. Oh man, yeah, Captain Trips, man, what a trippy last year or so it's been. But so let's talk this amazing collection, everybody. Let me just get another sip of this hot tea. Hoping it's going to keep my voice going through. First and foremost, though, I do have to give a shout out to my peeps at Cemetery Dance, because this is a beloved edition of theirs that they put out. And in a couple different stories, there is like the essence of duality, most notably the two that bookend this collection of 4, this being the 3rd collection of quatro novellas that King put out, the previous 2 being 4 Past Midnight and then different seasons. This one is right there in my estimation with both of those. And this beloved deluxe edition is, I think this might have been, I got this right around the same time that I got the first Secretary of Dreams, and then that beloved It version of mine. I believe Glenn Chadbourne does the artwork in this. So yeah, you got Homeboy there. Great painted stuff, and then also some good. Let's find the black and white real quick just to show you guys just the full extent of his beauty. Yeah, there's the dilapidated farmhouse and Hemford home. But yes, I adore this collection. This is just the gift edition, but I'm not sure the price on obtaining it in comparison with some of the other ones. I'm pretty sure it's long out of print, but that is a beloved portion of my collection. But let's scope out the cover that at least most American audiences are familiar with, which I'm not too big on this cover personally. I don't know if it's it's either Darcy or it's our big driver girl. But yeah, in any event, this is the one that I'm familiar with. And just take a gander one more time. And I know I have it in the thumbnail. And there's Sai King looking all studly and stuff on the back. Great for his age, although this was 10 years ago, a little over 10 years ago at this particular point, actually. This book celebrated its anniversary on November 5th, but it was the December book of the month because, we had a lot of anniversaries here in the past fall season before we segued into the wonders of winter. And so this book was released on November 5th of 2009, and it got lots of acclaim. It won the British Fantasy Award and the Bram Stoker Award for Best Collection. And then it also, for 1922 specifically, won the Stoker Award. I believe it was either Stoker or British Fantasy, I don't know, for Best Novella. And in some ways, that might be the strongest story, but I don't know. I have a soft spot for Fair Extension. Big Driver is probably my least favorite because of the fact that I'm not as into the whole rape revenge stuff, which King even mentions in this, the Jodie Foster Brave one and Spit on Your Grave and all that different stuff, Last House on the Left. I'm not, it's a subgenre of horror that I find incredibly uncomfortable and really disturbing because of the fact that, as a man who respects women to the utmost, just to even think of something like that transpiring is awful if you see a headline, let alone a detailed description of the situation. In some ways, is it worse from a literary standpoint, or is it worse to actually witness it in something like Last House on the Left? I know King praised the remake significantly of that film in particular. I don't know. I guess that's a thing that is up for debate, everybody. But yeah, so Big Driver being my least favorite, but still very strong, and it's got an interesting twist in the back half. By the way, as I briefly go story by story here, novella by novella, there is going to be spoilers for anybody who might not be familiar with these. There's also film adaptations of 3 of the 4 of these. So in 2014, they adapted, ironically, in the same month of October, they adapted both the aforementioned Big Driver with Maria Bello. I believe that was a Lifetime original. Still very effective, very good, despite, can't really go as R-rated on a channel like Lifetime as you could with A Good Marriage, which was released in a limited theatrical essence, I guess. And that had Joan Allen in the role of Darcy. And both of those are solid and serviceable. I know Richard Christian Matheson wrote the script for the Big Driver film. I forget who did the one for A Good Marriage, but my personal favorite of the 3 adaptations from this is 1922. Thomas Jane gives a fantastic performance as Henry, man. I mean, that one came out in 2017, which was, as I've dubbed it, the year of the King Assance, where he really came back to prominence with it. And also, we had the horrors of the Dark Tower film and stuff like that. Gerald's Game was also. So it was a year of a lot of adaptations, but I believe it was one of the last ones that came out because it came out in October of 2017. Mike Patton from Fantasmas and Faith No More and Mr. Bungle and Tomahawk, the eclectic awesomeness of that guy. Dead Cross, too, which is a great side project of his with Lombardo, formerly of Slayer. He did a very just kind of eerie, ethereal score. I love that movie. It's really kind of a bummer that both 1922 and the aforementioned Gerald's Game, being a standalone novel, obviously, that neither of those have seen a proper home release with some sort of supplemental material, some behind the scenes, some interviews, hopefully at some point, because Netflix does put out some of their stuff on home release. I know they've done it with Stranger Things and a couple other of their more prominent properties. But yeah, man, I would love to have those. I own every other Sai King release and silly spin-off, like all the Children of Corn shit and whatever's. But yeah, I would love to have those sitting on my shelf with all my other King media at some particular point. And the only one that didn't get an adaptation, obviously, is Fair Extension. It's the shortest of the stories, and yet it's one that I would adore to see adapted because it is a very cynical, sinister sort of story. Not to say that the other three aren't, but especially with it's not a story that has a comeuppance, if that makes sense. And, as I said, we'll get into spoilers as I briefly go through each story, but this is just overall thoughts. And yeah, Fair Extension's got one of those like effed up stories where, like, I guess the person who does wrong, I guess it is in that way because it is someone who has been wronged and then they, kind of turn the tables, so to speak. But I feel like it's like the most cathartically dark of stories because at the end of, A Good Marriage, like it's, I don't know, we will get to it. But Fair Extension would be a great episode of Creepshow or, The New Twilight Zone or something like that. So let me see what everybody else is saying in this chat thing. I did see the numbers have risen slightly. And once again, thanks so very much to everybody who's making a brief appearance. If you hit the like button, that really helps us significantly in just those little moving numbers of monetization and ad possibilities and, all those metrics and, data stuff that YouTube loves to punish horror channels for. So that's, it's great. It's great. All right. Okay, so Mark Dale, Corey's making an appearance. You're a hot tea. I'm trying to be, sucker. I'm trying to be. It's been a very, very weird last week or so. In fact, just briefly, it's been a very weird start to this new year. I feel like there was a lot of naivety, perhaps, that it was going to be like a flip a switch and everything is all terrific and shizzle, and that's not been the case, especially here in the States, man. It's been nuts, and it was just crazy how it went from being like kind of down and depressed about some stuff that, happened here in the country with somebody new kind of coming into office, not to get political. So, you're like emotionally like in kind of turmoil about that. And I wasn't sleeping too well. And then in turn, I get sick. And so it's just like, man, it's been 2021 here. I joked at one point on social media. I was like, man, wouldn't it be crazy if 2020 was just a trailer for 2021? God damn, I hope not. But yeah, that whole Viking folk metal resurgence in DC, I wasn't the biggest fan of. So who else we got? I believe I mentioned Richard Forrest. Yo, sir. Sarah C. made it in time. Sam Lesser. Oh, finally. Unreliable idiot. Thanks, buddy. Very sympathetic. Greatly appreciate you. Okay. Zach King. 1922 is probably the most depressing King story I've read, mainly with what happens to the son's girlfriend. Innocence Lost always gets me. Yeah, Zach, you are spot on about that. And there's no question that just the kind of sinister selfishness of the conniving man, as he describes himself. Yeah, it just that whole trickle down factor. The apple not falling far, and just the nasty deeds that his son goes to, and just how it was almost like a spreading sickness that, poisons everybody around. So, okay. And then Maddie Jorison says Stephen King wrote the screenplay for A Good Marriage. Okay, Maddie with the fact checking. And actually, Maddie sent me a special little care package through the emails that is going to be an upcoming episode of the show as we get later into the end of the Stand television series on CBS All Access. So I'm hoping to do some finally proper comic book coverage of the Marvel adaptation, which I still think is the quintessential adaptation of the source material. It's my personal favorite. The art is terrific. And then we're going to talk about some other aborted incarnations of the Stand. And he sent me some insights. So Maddie, thank you so very much again for some assistance with that. Okay, Julio Sermeno says, "What's up, brother man?" And then she stink hella bad. I'm back with a new account. Oh, terrific. So, okay. Let's talk 1922, everybody. Let's talk Henry. Let's talk the conniving man. Let's talk just this return to Hemmingford home, which we had previously seen with Mother Abigail in the stand. It's also where Ben moves to after leaving Derry. In it, what else? The Last Rung in the Ladder, obviously, that short story. Who could forget that brief and tragic one about the loss of a sibling? And so, yeah, we return to Hemmingford home, but this time it's in 1922, but it is told through flashbacks from our main protagonist, Henry, and it's basically about how he was just at odds with his nasty wife. And yes, she was far from a perfect person, but did she deserve the fate that befell her? I highly doubt it. So, yeah, man, he essentially, after just disagreeing about the land and the sale of it with her, they basically have these areas just adjacent to one another. If I recall correctly from rereading it, a week or so ago before. Oh boy, it was like 2 weeks ago now, unfortunately. But she owns more, and she is just kind of trying to convince him to sell, not transpiring, unfortunately. And so based on that, he decides to get her good and frazzled, and at the behest of, with lots of coercion, he gets his son to go along with killing her, throwing her in the well, and it just it's such a dark story. And the fact that, he has this just very old school mentality. I mean, it's 1922, even though he's writing it in April of 1930. It's his confession, so to speak. And cities are for fools. He's got that just, very prevalent ideology of the time about, she wants to go to open an antique store and, in the city and all this different stuff. But he is not about Omaha, not about going there, man. And he believes, and this is one of my favorite quotes from the story, he says, "I believe that there is another man inside every man, a conniving man, a stranger." And this is the interesting duality that I was mentioning, because you also get this with Darcy in our fourth and final story, A Good Marriage, because she has this memory from her childhood of just a much more like a sinister mirroring version of herself when she looks in the mirror. It's kind of very Alice through the looking glass sort of vibe, but we will get to that. But so that is a running theme about just the darkness that dwells within all of us, and how, if the situation is right, it'll come out. And we get that in Big Driver as well, with just the revenge and the repercussions of what happens to Tess. But some other favorite quotes of this from mine, a woman's looks are the honey that lure men on to the stinging hive. And it happens to his son, and the fact that, he's so lonely and so guilt-ridden after they, conspire and kill his mother and, the well stuff and all that. And so, yeah, he goes and he gets this very, very young girl, they're barely teenagers, pregnant, and she in turn gets sent away. And they turn into this kind of Bonnie and Clyde sort of situation, because his kid, Henry's kid, runs away, and he goes and he breaks her out of this place that she has been sent by her father. Because this is still happening to this day, but obviously, 100 years ago, you most definitely, even 50 and 30 years ago in some cases, you were pretty much every time if an unwed underage girl was pregnant, she would be sent away. Just to pull the curtain back a little bit, this happened with my father's biological mother, because my yaya, she was his adopted mother. My dad's actual mother was 16 here in Arizona, and she got pregnant in the 50s, and she got sent up to the Northwest to have this kid. And there were arrangements made to have it brought back and be adopted. And so that's where my father got his parents. So yeah, these things have been happening forever. And it's just a very sad, tragic tale, because, Henry's son is losing his mind in one capacity, and yet, back on the farm, freezing, and, rats coming and biting his hand, and, having to, get rid of it, and with the infection and all that different stuff. It's got a very Lovecraft, even Poe to a degree type vibe, with, just hearing the rats and all that. You can tell where King derives some inspiration from, even if he says Bradbury and Matheson and, Block and stuff are his biggest influences. When King goes Gothic, because this is a very Gothic story, he most definitely, most definitely just really shows where's his influences on his sleeve. And so is there hell, or do we make our own on earth? Another interesting sentiment. Very young men cannot but put bleh, if I could talk, man. Sorry, guys. Very young men cannot but put their first loves on pedestals, and that's just Henry trying to, just figure out the sense and the perspective of his son, and he's trying to rationalize it, hoping that he's going to kind of come out of it. Murder is a sin, daunting, but also work, and that's just, it probably takes a lot to kill somebody and properly cover it up. Naming the cows after Greek goddesses as well, I thought was funny. But there's a passage from page 42 that I wanted to get to. And thanks again, everybody who's making a brief appearance here. And I'm trying to find that exact spot. But yes, there were always worse things waiting. As I peered down frozen with shock and revulsion, Elphys kicked out again, and one of her hoops connected with what remained of Arlette's face. Yeah, this whole instance with, just the rotting corpse of the mother and, the cow being down there too, and just all that different stuff. There was a snap on my wife's jawbone, and everything below her nose shifted to the left as if on a hinge. Still the ear-to-ear grin remained. That was no longer aligned with her eyes, made it even worse. It was as if she now had two faces to haunt me with instead of just one. Her body shifted against the mattress, making it slide. The rat on her head burrowed down behind it. Yeah, this basically... It's one of the most gnarly and grisly bits in the entirety of it because of, just the consumption of her corpse by these creatures. And it just, there is so much very, very disturbing stuff. And, the rats are hers now, as Henry goes on to declare. And, this was another interesting sentiment that Henry has, with all of his internal dialogue and stuff. He says, God rewards good, but does Satan reward evil? And in some ways, Elvid in our Fair Extension story, you could kind of argue that. Most definitely could, man. It's a possibility, And then he also says money fixes everything because he gets to sell the property with Arlette no longer being around. He's like, no, money spoils everything. And in the end, we are all caught within devices of our own making in just the insanity where, He's disappeared from his library job in Omaha, and he's writing this confession, and he is at that breaking point of he thinks he's got three corpses: his son, his son's, the mother of his child, and also Arlette and stuff. I mean, he's envisioning that they're all there, and he can hear the rats, and he thinks the rats are coming and chewing on him at the very end. It's very gnarly and very effed up, and it's a terrific story. And yes, anybody who has thoughts on this one, please chime in. It is significantly appreciated. And yeah, let's jump right into Fair Extension, man. Fair Extension, as I said, the shortest one. And this is about a guy named Streeter, and he's dying from that cancer, man. And he presumes he's got maybe 6 months. But the amount of Easter eggs in this one is especially fun because this story takes place in Derry. And so you get mentions of the Barons, and there's a mention of the flood at the end of it, and how this buddy of Streeter's basically, he made his fortune, his millions, in fact, by starting basically a waste management and recycling company that, Streeter has been friends with this guy since they were in grade school or something. And this guy had always been, the more handsome, the more popular, steals, one of his first girlfriends. It's so messed up, but yet he had continued to go to bat for this guy. And so when he meets this weird dude named Elvid, devil spelled backwards, which Streeter figures out almost immediately, he's like, I play a lot of Scrabble. And that's most definitely, the guy appears, he's behind the Derry airport, in the back where the deliveries are. And he's kind of a dude who would sell trinkets and, certain roadside crap or whatever. But yeah, man, it's just it's very intriguing because he describes him initially as being this short, rotund little fat dude. But as they have their discussion about, fair extension, fair price and all that, and how he extends things. He extends everything from improving guys' vision to, improving the length of their wangs, and how they call him they have some Spanish name for him that I found incredibly funny. But as they get deeper into the discussion, and Streeter gets upset himself, talking about how this best friend of his has always just had everything go right for him, and how, he it was at his own sacrifice at times. Elvid gets like bigger and creepier looking, and what is it, Elvid? Or yeah, it is Elvid. Yeah. What am I? Yeah. Anyway, guys, it's just it's a very strange story, very brief and very darkly comedic at times. But it's interesting because you get a little bit of King's like distaste of flying and love for driving in this, and you get that in Big Driver as well, and the fact that Tess likes to drive specifically to her speaking engagements, not as fond of flying and whatnot. So you can tell that that's why King, when he had those speaking tours in like the 90s for Desperation, he would get on his motorcycle and he would drive. I believe he says that when he goes from Maine to Florida, he drives. He's not particularly fond of flying, which is interesting. But so basically, this Elvid, this mix up of the word devil, basically, he convinces Streeter that if you give me 15% for the next 15 years, I will extend your life. And he takes it with a grain of salt initially, but the biggest thing is he has to take his deathly affliction and pass it on to somebody, which in turn is that that best friend of his. But just the way Elvid, as he's getting more excited and angry and stuff, starts to get taller and his teeth sharpen, and he's like crying joyful tears of blood and stuff. King describes it magnificently, man. It's some terrific prose. I really, really dig the hell out of it. I think it's pretty fantabulous. So this story, it's a lot more sprawling despite the shortness in the length of the text. The span of time it starts in August, I think, late July, early August of 2001, and then it spans all the way through 2009. And it hurries. It doesn't take its time in this regard. And it's interesting how King has this dichotomy that he goes into, where as all of Streeter's fortunes are starting to turn around, and then his buddy has everything kind of. I'm trying to remember the name of the buddy. I guess it's of ill consequence, but I mean, as everything is kind of turning around and it's the seesaw is in motion. He's basically counterbalancing it with all of these bad things happening to celebrities. Like he talks at one point about Winona Ryder getting arrested for shoplifting, and then Kiefer Sutherland for drunk driving, and then later on he talks about when Blink-182 got in the plane accident, and he's like, and for once the Rockers actually survived. It's been there. Well, once again, there's just a very snide cynicism to this story that when King goes into this sort of realm, I always find it just darkly amusing to whatever degree. And before Streeter, this was a nice little Easter egg besides hearing about the Barons and Juniper Hill and being in Derry and all this different stuff. Streeter, when he's sharing a beer, this boozy micro brew that his rich friend is so fond of, he says to him, "Long days and pleasant nights," as they cheers. And his buddy's like, he's like, "Where'd you come up with that?" He's like, "I don't know. I just thought of it." And it's very funny in that regard. So, but yeah, the stuff where Streeter's getting a promotion and his kid becomes this IT whiz, and his daughter's got this bustling journalism career. Unfortunately, the guy who he passed it along to, everything goes wrong with his company. We're talking money embezzlement. We're talking horrible stuff for his family. His wife dies of cancer. He gets gout and just sinks into horrible alcoholism. And then his son has this really early life heart attack, and there's brain damage and stuff. And his other son, stabs his wife in the stomach with a fork or something. I mean, we're talking just messed up across the board. But the amusing thing is that at the very end of the story, and this kind of summarizes that kind of cynical nature very well. So at the very end, Streeter and his wife, they're just gazing up at the stars and just thinking about how great their life has been. And now this is only 8-9 years into Streeter's extension. And he proceeds to say, as his wife is so distraught about the fact that everything has gone so wrong for his buddy, he basically says, Where we at? Life is fair. We all get the same 9 months shake in the box and then the dice roll. Some people get a run of 7s. Some people, unfortunately, get snake eyes. It's just how the world is. She put her arms around him and said, I love you, sweetie. You always look on the brighter side, which is very funny. Streeter shruggedly, modestly said, the law of averages favors optimists. Any banker would tell you that. Things have a way of balancing out in the end. So you can tell that this friend of his that kind of wronged him in his regard so many times that, he was taking joy in his pain. And so that's where I feel like this would most definitely, for any sort of anthology horror, whether it's New Twilight Zone or the new Creepshow, I feel like it would be very, very strong, and I would love to see this adapted. It would be so awesome. So I know I went out of order, but that's because I was just so anxious to talk about Fair Extension. It's the third story technically in this, but let's jump to Big Driver and the story of Tess, who is an author in Connecticut, if I recall correctly, who writes a series of these. It's like Angela Lansbury meets like the Nancy Drew Boxcar Kid, something. I don't know what you would describe it as, mystery of the traveling pants or whatever. But there's this crew of older ladies who solve these very vanilla mystery sort of situations. It's called the Willow Grove Knitting Society. And it's interesting because she goes on this speaking engagement, and you can tell she's not the biggest fan of them, but she appreciates the support from her readers, even if she doesn't really think her stuff is like the most intellectually stimulating or amazing or whatever. So she's called last minute as a replacement to speak at this place for this monthly thing that is attended primarily by older women who go out always wearing hats, which I thought was kind of funny. So King musing about this, and also more about his love of driving, and interesting observations about speaking engagements and just how he presumably approaches them, because he goes through Tess's mental order of how she likes to, sequentially go through stuff. So that was kind of cool. But so she's given some strange directions by this woman who organized the event, this older, very, very tougher lesbian woman. And I'm not going to use the D term, the BD term that I think King used at one particular point, but we're talking not a lipstick lesbian, not a femme or whatever. But yeah, man. So she's given these directions of what's supposed to be a shortcut, and she takes said shortcut, and it's very remote, desolate, and she runs over like a strip of nails or something, man. So somebody had laid a trap. She's hopeful that that's not the case. But when this big bastard comes and takes her and initially offers to help, and then proceeds to viciously rape, man. It's a tough story. And as I said at the beginning of this broadcast, this is a very rough one to read, especially. You hate hearing the description of it, and thankfully it's rather brief, and then it's just all about the aftermath. It's about hearing him singing Brown Sugar afterwards. It's about seeing this pipe that he puts her in, and there's like other rotting corpses and stuff in there. So he's a pro at this crap, man. And so it just, thankfully, Tess works up the gusto after watching some of those rape revenge films, like the Jodie Foster one I mentioned earlier in the broadcast here. And she does some research, and she figures the connection between the woman who actually sent her on this particular route and the fact that she's obviously been enabling for who knows how friggin' long. Really disgusting in that regard. And that's where it gets interesting. I did a couple Easter eggs just to throw out real quick. She is making reference to all kinds of horror films throughout, as I already said. I did find it very funny that she remembers her AT&T calling card number, because after she escapes, she's like, she is obviously a broken woman, but she doesn't have her vehicle or her purse or money or anything. And so she uses her AT&T calling card, which she's like, I always remember it's my phone number plus 9712, which obviously if you add all those numbers together, you get 19, baby. So I thought that was King likes putting those little nods in there, which I really appreciate. And then Tess, basically, after she finally gets herself home, she goes through the grieving process, then she goes into revenge mode with the research. She basically goes right into this same detective mode of the women that she had written about, except obviously in a much more hardcore, dire situation. And yeah, she has to go back and get her vehicle initially, where she makes a connection with this woman at this site. I guess it was like a lodge, if I remember correctly. But that woman comes into play with helping her out in the aftermath of the revenge after she's extracted it. Yeah, I mentioned the brave one already. It's got a very weird kind of internal dialogue of sorts, because she talks back and forth with her cat and with her GPS. At least the GPS is actually talking back, but she envisions as she's trying to rationalize a lot of stuff and like formulate her plan and how she's going to go about actually going after this big driver, this asshole of sorts. And yeah, you can tell she's experiencing some serious PTSD, and she's got so much she's still trying to process, but she knows she has to act fast, or at least she feels she needs to. And so yeah, she finally tracks down the mother, and who was completely shocked to see her. And she goes to town. First she stabs her, and then she gets like an oven mitt and takes this gun and just blasts her brains out. Like, this story gets like, Tess has a badass within her, and it reminded me a lot as I was rereading it of a film that I reviewed on Fuego recently that just hit VOD this weekend, and it's called Promising Young Woman. And basically, with two characters that get killed in this that didn't actually rape her, but were presumably aware of said crime, and obviously, presumably, quite a few more. And it's definitely a guilty by association sort of situation in that regard, except Tess kills the motherfuckers is what it boils down to. So how life did imitate art sometimes, and the cruder the art, the closer the imitation. That was another one of my favorite lines in this, because it's like, yeah, if the art is cruder and less sophisticated, it's easier to replicate, and that's where, much easier to imitate, that's for sure. I thought that was a great line. And then as she's trying to just formulate about how murderers always overlook the obvious, because after she gets done killing 3 people, because the big twist is that the initial big driver that she goes after is actually the older brother of the little driver. They're both big, but there's like a big driver and then a bigger driver. And that's the big twist in this. Big twist. There you go. That's funny. But yeah, man, it's just interesting because she goes and kills the bigger driver thinking that's the dude, but then she realizes, wait, this isn't the guy who raped me. And so in turn, she goes back and she finishes the job proper. But yeah, so there's 2 other people who just kind of assisted in the conspiring, I guess. And so for that reason, she's got a little bit of like just moral shifting, like the compass within her. She's just like, man, did I really need to go to those lengths? And, she's just kind of trying to come to terms with that, as well as all of the horrors that she experienced herself. She does think about killing this dog at one point that the big driver, not the little driver, has. Really glad she didn't, because that's taking it too far, killing animals. It's funny how in stories, you're like, if they kill the dog, that almost feels even worse sometimes. But take a look at the comments as we're about to charge to our final story and wrap things up here. Everybody, thanks very much once again for any who took a peek here. Stand is one of my dad's favorites, says Sarah C. Mark Pearson, I believe he was referring to Fair Extension, that he said this was probably my favorite story in this book. Luis Almodovar says, long live the horror show, and Mr. Fire and his crew. Just bought this book a few months back and getting ready to give it a go. Well, Luis, I'm sorry that I'm doing the whole spoiling thing on this one, but that's the thing. I knew what I was coming into getting back to this book, having read it a few times. And actually the original copy of it was also a gift from my folks when it first came out, so that was kind of cool. But now we get to our finale. We get to a good marriage. And this, as King mentions, and King actually has a great afterword in this. Where I love when he gives insight to where all of the ideas for these stories came from. I know Fair Extension, he said, was from this guy who would like collect golf balls by the Bangor airport, and he was like this weird trinkets selling dude. So he saw that, and then also the nonfiction book Wisconsin Death Trip was the inspiration for 1922, and how he just wanted to capture those early images of desolation and stuff. And Glenn Chadbourne in the aforementioned Cemetery Dance really captures it perfectly in his painted work, as he always does. He's great at capturing that grimy sort of just out in the wilderness sort of living situation. And then Big Driver, he basically King was stopping for, as he describes it, a healthy Stephen King lunch of a soda pop and a candy bar, and he saw this big dude who looked kind of foreboding, who was all sweet on this lady who had a flat tire, and that's where the gears started turning in his head. But lastly, this story of a good marriage was about the BTK killer, and how this guy had been an operating serial killer for decades, and yet he was married. And they were like, how could his wife not know about this situation? And that's what our beloved Darcy finds herself in the midst of. She has an insurance selling husband who she's been married to for 27 years at this point in the story, which I found, and it's another little nod of Sai King. And yes, I believe she is in Maine. So this is another one, because Castle Rock is mentioned in this story, most notably with her husband, when you find out how far back his sickness has gone. But so basically, Darcy's husband, Bob, has been an operating serial killer for decades under this pseudonym of Beatty, but she has been clueless about it. And both of the readers who do this, I forget the names. It's like there is a male who does 1922 and does Fair Extension. He also does the Afterword, and then there is a woman who does both Big Driver and A Good Marriage, because they're both from a lady's perspective. And she embodies, because I both read and listened, as I always like to do. And as I was sick in bed this past week and finally feeling a little bit better, as I was still lying around, so I don't watch TV in bed or anything when I'm not feeling good, I was re-listening to like A Good Marriage and a few of the others. And the narrator, she injects this like just very, dare I say, like that sort of frail, like housewife, who's like just kind of timid and stuff. And so that's why her arc in this, just like with Tess's, but you can kind of tell Tess is kind of a badass to a degree early on. But, Darcy is just very, very timid and just a very womanly woman in that old school manner of what you would think like the 50s, the perfect 50s housewife to be, very subservient and supportive and all that different stuff. She supports Bob's hobby of coin collecting and all this different stuff, and she never gets skeptical about all of these frequent business trips to look at coins and stuff that he takes. And so when he's gone on this one particular trip, when we join our story, she needs to go get batteries, and she stumbles first across a bunch of her shopping catalogs that he had hidden from her in this big stack in this box. And she's like, oh, I wondered where those went, because he hates me, ordering stuff. She thinks I'm addicted to it. And she's like, no, I'm addicted to Butterfingers. But she discovers Bondage Bitches, which is a magazine with no price tag. And she's kind of thumbing through all of these, finds another one. And she's like, oh, my husband's got some sick fetishes. This is not good, but, men experiment and look at weird things, I would imagine, sometimes. So she tries to write it off. But then as she tries to shove the box back under this area where it was, she hears a clank, and she discovers a smaller like gift box that she had given him. And it's got blood donor card and like library card and IDs and different things like that of this woman who she realizes had been seen murdered on the news. All the gears start clicking in her head. And this is where the story takes a very interesting perspective, because she starts trying to rationalize things, and then she refuses a few of her husband's phone calls. And since, Bob is a very smart, sharp kind of guy, he immediately comes home and he lays it all out, and he admits everything, and he proceeds to negotiate with her, which is just really crazy. And he's like, I'll stop doing it. I stopped for 16 years before when they first got married. And he's like, I just got a hankering for it again. But if you will stay with me, I will, I'll just, I'll stop. I promise I can stop. I stopped before. And she's skeptical, but yet she's like, as she says at one particular point, oh goodness, it's some musings about love, and I think that you could not turn off love, and that's the thing. She's like, I've spent 27 years with this man, and I do love him, and that's why I'm trying to think forgiveness. And I mean, they have 2 grown children together, and she's like, how would this reflect on me? How would this ruin the lives and reputations of my children, including my daughter Petra, who's about to get married, and my son, who has just started this new business. And so that's why she concedes, and she agrees, and days go by, weeks go by, months go by. In fact, a season or 2 goes by, if I remember. And then lo and behold, that's where she sees her opportunity, because it never left the back of her head. He finds this rare penny. They go out. He's always doesn't like drinking, because he always likes to be on his A game. As you would imagine, somebody who has to be constantly looking for a situation where they could slip up. They want to be sound of mind at all times. And there's like a True Grit quote in here where he's like, I would not, put something in my mouth that would, make me more susceptible to my enemies, or some crap like that. But it's a very, very interesting observation and stuff. But yes, he gets willy-nilly with champagne at this fancy dinner. And this was not a premeditated thing. This was just basically an opportunity suddenly presenting itself. And Darcy's just like, fuck it, you're done, dude. And she gives him what he deserves, pushes him down the stairs. She has to finish the deed, but she makes it look like an accident. And in turn, there you go. It's interesting, although she's not quite out of the woods just yet. But there's very interesting observations about, and you can tell this is where King is taking a lot of experience from his time married to Tabby for so long, in the fact that he says at one point, a marriage was like a house under constant construction. He's like, it starts out as a cottage initially, but after 27 years, it's a mansion with all kinds of, different, additional rooms, and it just grows and grows. So I thought that was interesting. He also says a woman who wandered into, that's not as consequential, but I guess that's good. I can just riff on that very briefly. When she discovers all of this, she's standing there and all the gears are turning in her head and she's processing. And she describes herself as feeling like a woman who'd wandered into a casino and just suddenly wagered her life savings, because she's like, this is my whole life suddenly, and it's in flux and it feels kind of out of my control, and what the hell do I do? And that's where she muses even further. Does anybody really know anybody? And just all of this, the history of the marriage, and the secrets of a marriage, all this stuff. It's a very fascinating story, and you can tell that King is most definitely writing what he knows. And when she goes into detective mode, just like Tess, so there's definitely parallels between the two of them to a degree, albeit it's a different sort of wrongdoing. There's, omnipotent Google, so generous, so terrible. That was a line that I found very, very amusing. But just learning the extent of Bob's crimes, and the fact that he would bite these women, and then he would like horrible stuff like that. And there was in turn one instance where there was like a 10-year-old boy involved too. And when you find out what he did, I don't want to go into it because it's gross. He claimed that the kid did not suffer, and then when somebody shows up at the very end of the story, this older detective who had been trying to nail Bob for decades, and just couldn't get enough evidence, and he had questioned him at one particular point. He says what Bob actually did to that boy, and man, Darcy's so mad. She's like, suffered my ass. And so it's just, man, it's a very fascinating story. And the stuff that I mentioned earlier about just seeing herself as evil incarnation on the other side of the mirror, when she was much younger, and how she kind of embraced and segued back into that. I guess it's not quite the conniving woman, but just the darkness of so many things. But this is a story that I feel like does at least have some light at the end of the tunnel, with the fact that she is vindicated at least to a degree. It's obviously a mixed bag. It's not all puppy dogs and ice cream, as they would say in Swingers. But still, man, it's a terrific story. The Joan Allen, Pagliano, I don't think he's a famous Italian actor. He was in like Empire Records and tons of other stuff. Both of them are good in it. I'll definitely give them credit. A little prettier than they are described as such. The filthy rinse cycle of cable news that she feared herself getting caught in, and because of the fact that she kept her mouth shut and killed him on her own and made sure he died on her own terms, that he had to atone at least to a degree for his crimes. This old detective comes and talks to her, and he knows, and he's trying to get her to admit it, and talking about, just some sort of peace for the families of the victims. And he's like, will they get any peace by knowing who killed, their person, especially if they find out that he's already dead? Different sort of story. And so he in turn concedes and leaves her to her life. And, that's about it. But WWDD, what would Darcy do, as Bob asks himself all the time? And it's just really crazy that everything started with him way back with this friend, Beatty, when he was like in junior high or like just getting into high school. And he was at Castle Rock High, and they were planning like some Columbine shit. And they didn't end up doing it, but he claims that what they were going to do to these girls and just a bunch of other people. All of these stories are dark, man. Full dark, no stars. This one really, really lives up to its title, man. And so that's going to be the end of the proceedings. I made it, guys. I made it through. I'm going to take another. It's not even super hot anymore right away. I'm scalding at the onset, but yes, I'm on the mend, thankfully, and I presume I will get. I've got that unboxing for next week, or we'll get some of that Run to the Hill stuff together. Now that I'm kind of back on social media at least a little bit and feeling like my my condition has improved, I will keep you updated as best I can. And obviously, it's being announced later in the month than anticipated, but this is the January book of the month. I know we're halfway through the month, but the discussion about this won't be until February 6th. So that's 3 weeks from today. If the schedule for whatever reason changes, I will let you know. But with us actually in the new year now, that should not be an issue. And with thankfully, just feel like my body's getting control of the crud that was overwhelming it. So I extend the grande gracias and Jaime and Fuego. You can find more on all social media sectors like Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, here on the YouTubies. And yes, like and just comment or whatever means a hell of a lot if you were watching this after the live broadcast. Thanks for bearing with. I think I projected as well as I could. I'm not as exuberant as y'all have seen me in previous occasions, but hopefully my appreciation and affinity for Sai King still came through. So thanks very much. And as I kind of took a look after not being on social media for a number of days after being sick, it's really great to see that the Hail to Stephen King Facebook group has that awesome near 1,000 of people that are still having discussion, whether it's about the new Stan series on CBS All Access, or whether it's about stuff they're currently reading, Freak Out Fridays, or where the floodgates are open and you can talk about anything as long as you are not trolling and you are being respectful of one another. And yes, that is the most important part, is that especially in times that remain uncertain, that's been the cliched phrase for a while, that we don't resort to just being bad people. Let's just have that common courtesy and respect. It's something that I hope we're trying to work on here in the good old US of A. But yeah, so if you want to be a part of that group, jump over and have some killer palaver. And yes, obviously subscribe here to the Horror Show if you just happen to stumble upon this. And episode 250, here we come. If you have any suggestions about the program going forward, please just make mention of that. But I have been Jaime and Fuego, and I guess until the Wheel of Ka comes around once more. Hasta luego, sin amigos. Constant readers and viewers alike say thank you. And yeah, I hope we share more of this palaver about my beloved El Rey sooner rather than later. And until then, stay scared. And obviously, read Stephen King. This is one that I do truly contend is rather underrated. Thanks again for tuning in, everybody. Alrighty, y'all. Peace out and stay healthy, stay well.